Hi guys, welcome back to our channel, Bunny Recaps. Today, we are going to see a 2019 release psychological thriller movie called Game Over. Sophie, a game designer, suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder and lives alone with her housemate. However, her life turns upside down after a serial killer enters her house, making her play a twisted game for survival. Getting into our movie, it begins with a person filming and stalking a young girl named Ella in his camera. Later he approaches her at night while she was asleep. Though she manages to get out of the room, she had been seized and suffered to death by suffocating for oxygen as she was entrapped by plastic bag around her head. After enjoying her suffering to death, the psycho killers brought her body out to a football court and chopped her head off so that they can play football. Her body had been burned to ashes by tying her to a chair. Then the scene cuts from there to our lead character Sophie, who is suffering from post-traumatic disorder. We can see here that her maid, Ava, is so close to her and she trusts her blindly. This is where her tattoo comes into picture as it hurts all of a sudden as days are nearing to New Year. We can also see here how she gets frightened when she is in dark place and goes into panic attack because of the trauma she has gone through in her past. Seeing this, Ava takes Sophie to a psychiatrist so that she can come over of it. This is where we come to that Sophie is a rape victim, and as days are nearing to New Year, her past is haunting and traumatizing her. Once again, when Sophie wakes up from sleep, her tattoo hurts a lot and she was worried about it, so she plans to visit the tattoo parlor to inquire what was the issue. That's when she comes to know that the tattoo artist tried many different ways to contact her back after she got her tattoo, but the artist failed to reach her. Sophie learns the reason behind the artist's urge to meet her was that by mistake the artist swapped a memorial tattoo ink instead of normal ink for tattooing Sophie. Sophie gets enraged by that some unknown person's ashes has been embedded into her bloodstream. Angry, Sophie leaves the parlor. She came back to her house and informs Ava about the careless act caused by the artist, and she doubts herself that from the day she got her tattoo done, her life turned miserable as she was been abducted on the same day, that is, on a New Year Eve. After Sophie getting her tattoo from the parlor on her wrist of a game symbol, and later scene shifts to Sophie, where she is held captive being raped and videoed as she was in a helpless condition. Getting reminded of the incidents, depressed Sophie attempts suicide by trying to cut the wrist veins, but the tattoo hurted so much that she withdraws her thought. Later, to get rid of the memorial tattoo, she visits a dermatologist, but the tattoo started to hurt so much that even doctor was confused and asked to postpone the procedure of removing it. Sophie was trying to figure out what was happening with her. Soon, in a coffee shop, she was recognized by two teenagers from the video that was shot by the molester, and the way those teenagers were looking at her made her feel bad about herself, as she is already going through so much and is in a vulnerable state because even her very own mother said that it's Sophie's mistake to go out on New Year Eve. Also, getting tattoo for guys is different, and if a girl gets tattoo, people take advantage of it. Getting reminded of all these, she starts thinking for herself, what if I hadn't gone out on that day? What if I hadn't got tattooed that day? What if I could have fought some more? What if I could have managed to escape from there? On top of all these, she came to know that her video of being raped was leaked in internet and so many can see it. Out of humiliation, she again tries to commit suicide by hanging herself to ceiling, but she was saved as there was a power cut and she is scared of dark. Ava rescuing her from the dark place and noticing her attempt to suicide, Ava again takes her to the psychiatrist. During the waiting time, Ava informs Sophie that Sophie's mother was planning to visit her. Knowing this, Sophie thought that her mother came to know about her video being leaked on net. As she was scared of facing the reality, she runs to the open place of the building and tries to jump from the floor, but she hits the car. Then the movie shows Sophie being alive, but with disability to walk. Soon, a visitor pays visit at Sophie's place. The person is the mother of the girl's ashes, whose memorial tattoo is in her wrist. It is the same girl, Ella, that we saw in the beginning of the movie. Ella's mother explains what kind of a person was Ella. Sophie learns that Ella was a cancer fighter, and she has fought with cancer thrice, and every time she fights cancer she gets a tattoo, and that is how she was having 3 same-day tattoo on her hand. Ella has a fighter personality and never gives up. Ella's mother gives Sophie a letter, which was written by Ella to her mother during her chemotherapy. It stated, "We all have 2 lives, the second one starts when we realize we only have one." Then the scene shifts to New Year Eve and there is only an hour left for New Year. Sophie, who is in deep sleep, wakes up because of a nightmare and finds there were no light. Scared, Sophie turns the lights on and notices time to be 11 p.m. All of a sudden, she hears a sound from out, and Ava goes out to check and thinks it must be security guy, as he always keeps the flask out and rings the bell so that Ava would refill it with the beverage. As soon as Ava stepped out, an unknown masked killer kills Ava. Panicked Sophie calls out Ava and finds no response, so she gets on her wheelchair and goes to check what happened. Sophie locks the door and through window. She was looking at Ava on a swing and suddenly strikes by the chopped head of Ava. Terrified, Sophie runs for help and tries to lock herself, but unfortunately power gets cut, and as she is scared of dark, she again runs back to hall and falls off from her wheelchair. That's when she found out she was having 3 tattoos, alike on her wrist instead of 1. Confused Sophie looks around and finds the killer. Killer finds happiness from Sophie's pain as he was stamping Sophie's wounded leg and she was crying out of pain. Later he beheaded her and lit her body to burn. Suddenly, Sophie wakes up from sleep and turns on the lights and started thinking it was just a bad dream and checks on the tattoo. To her surprise, there were 2 tattoos left alike and also the time was 11 p.m. Again the same sound repeats from outside and Ava goes to check, but this time as Sophie remembers what had happened previously and Sophie shouts Ava not to answer the door, but Ava had already opened and closed the door. Ava thinks Sophie is blabbering something because of some bad dream and tries to console her and shows her that no one is there out, but to her shock, she finds the security guard body in the garden. Though they have closed the door, the masked killer enters the house by the terrace. Knowing that the killer is in house with a knife and handycam, Ava and Sophie locks themselves in a room and calls police. Police informs to lock all the doors and stay safe until they reach in 10 minutes. Ava and Sophie were hiding in the room and questions Sophie. How does she knows the details of the killer? Confused Sophie gets panic as the power goes off, but Ava finds light in the living room and tells Sophie will go there so that she gets relieved from panic attack. But Sophie confronts her weakness and informs Ava that the killer is outside, so we have to stay in the room itself. Soon the room was lit fire from outside by the killer so that they would come out. As expected, because of the fire in the room, Ava and Sophie comes out of the room. Ava, moving the wheelchair, runs fast towards the door as police had arrived, but the killer kills Ava by stabbing her and holds Sophie from answering the door and hurts her. Sophie then pulls the window curtains aside and knocks on the window. Seeing killer, police shoots him through the window itself, and then Sophie opens the door and police gets in and checks that Ava was dead and the house seemed suspicious, so police plans to evacuate Sophie as soon as possible and drives her out of the place. Sophie, in the ride with the police, notices by the side mirror and realizes that there are 3 masked killers and they have lit the police vehicle through the fuel tank. Petrified, Sophie shouts at police to stop the vehicle, but by then the vehicle blasted and all were died. And again, Sophie wakes from her couch and finds time to be 11 p.m. and only 1 more tattoo left in her wrist. Deeply thinking about it, she goes to turn on the light but looks at the letter written by Ella stating, "We all have 2 lives." The second one starts when we realize we only have 1. That's when Sophie realizes that this is her last chance to survive from the killers and also figures out that these 3 were the killers who killed Ella. Sophie now should plan correctly so that she will be saved from these serial killers. Sophie gets on her wheelchair without even turning the lights on and faces her weakness over dark. She educates Ava about the killers and plots plan to kill them. Firstly, they call up the police and informs that they were surrounded by killers and also directs police to take a shortcut by which they can reach even more earlier. Then they cut off the whole power supply before the killers would do that, as they know that one of the killer finds his way through the terrace. Ava was assigned to pour the diesel that was bought as a fuel for the generator. Ava executes the plan and pours the diesel, and Sophie by the window lights the killer and he was burned to death. Happy Ava comes into the building and finds other killer near the stairs and pushes Ava from the top floor. On the stairs itself, Sophie, in attempt to help her, comes in, but Ava indicates that there is a killer behind her. Sophie turns back and sees the killer about to chop her head off. By then Ava manages to stab the killer's foot with a knife and removes Sophie's footrest nut and indicates her to remove it and hit the killer. Sophie hits him with the footrest. An angry killer pushes Sophie from her chair and crushes her left hand. Even though she was in pain, she manages to grab the footrest and hit the killer to death. Soon, Other killer from the terrace arrives, and Ava guides Sophie to a room and tries to lock her, but the killer dragged Ava out of the place and approaches Sophie. Sophie manages to reach a dressing table and pulls the mirror off the table to fall on herself so that she can use the broken mirror pieces to kill the killer, but smart killer figures out her plan and steps over the mirror by pressuring more on her. Sophie cries out in pain. While the killer was filming everything in his handycam, and then the killer moves the mirror and steps on her hand where she was holding the mirror piece to kill him and points the knife to her throat to behead her, but Sophie looks at her left hand and realizes that there is only one tattoo left, which means this is her last chance for survival. Though her left hand was been crushed, she forcefully holds a piece of mirror and stabs at the killer's throat, and the last killer was also been dead. Relaxed Sophie hears bursting of crackers as people were celebrating New Year. That's when Sophie realizes it was Ella who was helping her by giving 3 chances for not regretting on her life that she didn't do her best to help herself out of the situation. If you enjoy this video, please like and share your priceless comments. It will help us reach to other movie lovers. And do subscribe to our channel for more upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.